I picked up another chainsaw yesterday. It's the third chainsaw I got to fix up to resell. This is a Craftsman 2.3 solid state. It says it's a 14-inch, but it's got a 16-inch bar and chain on it. It's actually in pretty good shape. The fuel line, I think, is the problem. The guy said that he got it out to use it. It wouldn't start. It ran fine last time he used it a couple years ago. I took the carburetor cover off. Everything looks clean in there. So I'm going to put new fuel lines on it, see if it starts. If it does, I'll clean the saw up, clean the bar and chain up, sharpen the blade, and then put it up for sale. It's kind of the other side. Well, you can kind of see here, I took the cover off the top here. This is just screwed on like so. Took this off, and you can see the fuel line just brittle as can be. So I'm going to take this side of the saw off and get the fuel tank out. Do that. There's a screw here and the bar nut. Then I can take the bar and the chain off and clean them up and sharpen the chain and clean everything up, put new fuel lines on, see if it starts, see if I have to rebuild the carburetor or not. But carburetor looks pretty clean, may be able to get away without rebuilding. I'm going to just put fuel lines on, clean it, put fuel lines on, and see if it runs, see if I need to get a carb kit or not. Alright, now out comes the fuel tank. There's where the fuel line goes in. There's no clunk, no nothing in there. It's all completely gone. What's left of the fuel line there. So the fuel line's pretty much all shot on this saw. I think that hopefully that is all what's wrong with it. Hopefully we can get this thing going. I'll put a new fuel line in the tank. I got the old piece of fuel line out. You do this, you cut this like on an angle. Cut it like kind of on a slit so you can push it in. And then grab it with some needle-nose pliers or something and pull it through. Cut the part off that you cut to get it through. Put your fuel filter clunk on. And then put your clunk in the tank. You want enough fuel line so that can move around inside the tank. So as you're sawing and you move the saw around, that stays in the bottom of the fuel. So I always just like to have a little extra hose in there. Got the fuel tank back in place. I cleaned the inside of the fuel tank out with lacquer thinner. That's all cleaned out. Cleaned this all up in the parts washer. Clean this cover, everything up there. So now I'm just going to throw this back on, and then afterwards I'll route the rest of the fuel line. This little barb here is what goes between the two fuel lines to prevent them from, and this has still got some old line on it there. This just connects in here, and it connects to there. Okay, the barb's on, the hose end coming out of the tank, and I'll put it on this hose end that comes out of the hand. Now you can see this just pushes into that this little dimple in that, and then the fuel line's in the handle and up to the carburetor. And I will put the other cover on without the bar and the chain just to see if the thing runs. Alright, got the new fuel lines on. Saw's all cleaned up, back together. I'm going to put some gas in it. I'll take it outside, see if it starts or if it needs a carb overhaul. I put a little bit of gas in it. I did squirt some power tune in the carburetor. See if I can get it primed up, and choke's going to be kind of difficult, but we'll see what it does. This is a Walbro carburetor. It's pretty simple carb to remove. These two screws, throttle linkage will come off once I get the carburetor loose. This will come free, so just be careful you don't drop any of your parts. So I'm going to pull the carburetor, pull it apart, see if I have a kit. If I don't, I'll go order one. Alright, well, I guess I didn't have the camera on the right setting to video, but anyway, I took the carburetor apart. You take these screws out to get this cover off and your diaphragm out. The diaphragm's in good shape. This is the fuel pump, and it was pumping fuel up into the carburetor. Both the high and the low speed screws were opened a little bit more than a turn. Those are the screws right there. Everything looked good in the carburetor. The needle and seat isn't swollen. Everything looked good. I'm going to just give it a quickie clean out, and then we'll take the saw out and see if we can't get it going again. Here I'm going to make sure the fuel inlet is correct. I got this for this is the one for Walbro carburetors, and this is a WT carburetor, and I don't know if you can see on there, but that is WT. So that needs to just touch that when you do that, and it does. So that is set correctly. Alright, try 2 with a clean carburetor. Alright, I got it going. I think it was just flooded. It seems to be running okay now. Turn the idle up on it. I think that's all I need to do. Runs good. While I was fooling with this Craftsman chainsaw, I used it yesterday to do some cutting, and did not seem like the chain was getting enough oil. It was getting a little bit, but not much. So I took the filter out of there, take these 2 screws off this cover, and there's a foam filter much like the air filter. I took that out and cleaned it, and I sprayed gum out through the orifice there, and it came out here, so that tells me that that line was not plugged. So I put the filter back in and then went to the crankcase side of the saw, and I don't know if we can get the light here, but there's a, you can see where there's a shiny hole there. That's where the filter screen goes into the crankcase to pressurize the oil tank to make the oiler work. Well, I took that out, and it was almost totally plugged up. It's got a little screen in the end. That end goes in the crankcase. That end there is what pressurizes the oiler. This was really plugged up with deposits from the engine, so I just have it soaking in a little gum out. I sprayed it out with gum out. You can use gum out to spray there and out there. I spray it in this end and let it come out there, so if there is something blocking that, you push it out, not further into the line. Also talk about power tune. This stuff is an amazing cleaner. That will clean the most gummed up carburetors that you've ever seen with 2-cycle mix. So you could spray a little power tune in this if you wanted to. I've just got it soaking. I soaked it in lacquer thinner, and that didn't do as much as the gum out. With the carbon deposits, gum out was working, but power tune would really work, especially if you let it sit overnight. That stuff's amazing. But we're going to get that back on. So if you have one of these old Craftsman or Poland saws and they're the same saw basically, that the oiler is not working properly on, check your filter and make sure your line's clear first, and if that's all good, pop that nut out. And it's kind of tight in there. You can do it without removing the clutch. I used one of these thin wall Craftsman 1/2-inch box end wrenches, fit in there to where I could get that a grip on it and turn it out. If your wrench is too thick walled, it'll hit the casting and you won't get it off. And if you have to take the clutch off, you can either take the plug out and put the special tool in to stop the piston, or you can shove some rope down the spark plug hole to jam the piston, and then you just tap that with a punch clockwise, or if you have the special tool you can turn that off, but you got to keep the piston from moving. These are left-hand threads, so righty-tighty, lefty-loosey doesn't work on these. These are righty-loosey, lefty-tighty. So that kind of shows where that is for the oiler if you have one that's not getting enough oil. And you want the chain to get sufficient oil so you don't ruin your chain and bar. This was getting oil, but it was just, seemed to me it was too dry while I was cutting, and so I took the chain and bar off and cranked it up, and it was just barely coming out, and it should come out a little bit better than what it was coming out. So I think this is the culprit. This was almost totally plugged, and I've been just soaking it and working it, and the crud that's coming out of it is amazing. That's what the little part from the oiler looks like when it's reinstalled in the saw. And take it out and see if it start it and see if it oils. And one other thing I got to mention, the little thing that I took out showed the little metal thing for the oiler that goes, that is a one-way check valve too, so be careful with it. Just clean it out with some carburetor cleaner or power tune or something. Just get the carbon and the crud out of it, and then put it back in. So you don't want to ruin the little check valve in it. You want it to let pressure from the crankcase out into the oil tank to pressurize the oil tank. You don't want it sucking back in. If it sucks back in, it'll just suck the oil from the oiler into the crankcase, and your saw will smoke really bad and the chain won't oil. Plugging away at the saws, getting them all going, getting them all fixed up. The oiler, everything works good on the Home Light. Everything works good on the Craftsman. Like I said, I'm waiting on the carburetor kit for that saw. Well, the Craftsman saw is complete. New bar, new chain, new spark plug, new fuel line. The carburetor was clean. It didn't really need going through. I did clean it, but the carburetor was fine. The saw cleaned up really nice. It's an aluminum case saw, which is much better than the plastic saws. Take them all apart and clean them all. Totally like recondition them. Clean the fuel tanks, oil tanks. It's got a new air filter foam in it too. So this saw is ready to saw. Basically like a brand new saw.